The Earth is warming, this is not a drill, it's not a future threat, it's happening now. The consequences are everywhere. Melting glaciers, rising sea levels, extreme weather events. We are living in a climate crisis. For decades, scientists have warned us about the dangers of burning fossil fuels. They told us about greenhouse gases and their impact on the atmosphere. They predicted the very disasters we are witnessing today, yet for too long their warnings were ignored. Powerful corporations driven by greed chose profit over the planet. Politicians influenced by these industries failed to act with the urgency the situation demanded. We are inheriting a planet in peril, but we are not giving up. We are fighting for our future, we are demanding change, we are the voice of a generation that will not be silenced. The Industrial Revolution marked a turning point in human history. It was a time of great technological advancement and economic growth. It brought progress and innovation, but at a terrible cost. The relentless pursuit of industrialization led to the exploitation of natural resources and the degradation of the environment. The discovery and exploitation of fossil fuels, coal, oil, and gas unleashed an unprecedented wave of carbon emissions. These fuels powered the engines of industry, but they also began to alter the composition of our atmosphere. Factories sprouted across the globe, their chimneys spewing black smoke into the atmosphere. The air became thick with pollutants, affecting the health of countless individuals and ecosystems. Trains and ships powered by coal crisscrossed land and sea, leaving a trail of pollution in their wake. These modes of transportation revolutionized trade and travel, but they also contributed significantly to environmental degradation. The age of mass production and consumption had begun. Factories churned out goods at an unprecedented rate, feeding the growing demand of a burgeoning population. For centuries, this unsustainable model of development continued. Cities expanded, industries grew, and the environment paid the price. We became addicted to fossil fuels, ignoring the warning signs. The convenience and power of these energy sources blinded us to their long-term consequences. The concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, stable for millennia, began to rise dramatically. This increase in greenhouse gases has led to a warming planet, with far-reaching effects. This is not ancient history. The industrial practices of the past have set the stage for the environmental challenges we face today. This is the legacy we carry. The scars of industrialization are visible in polluted rivers, deforested lands, and contaminated air. The consequences of past emissions are felt today, and the impact of our current actions will resonate for generations to come. It is a stark reminder that our choices today shape the world of tomorrow. When it comes to carbon emissions, not all countries are created equal. Historically, industrialized nations in North America and Europe have been the biggest polluters. They fueled their economies with fossil fuels, reaping the benefits while polluting the planet. Today, the situation is more complex. While developed countries still bear a significant responsibility, emerging economies like China and India are rapidly increasing their emissions as they grow and industrialize. However, focusing solely on national emissions can be misleading. It's crucial to consider per capita emissions, which paint a different picture. Often countries with high overall emissions have relatively low per capita emissions, reflecting their large populations. Furthermore, we must acknowledge the issue of outsourced emissions. Developed nations often shift their manufacturing and polluting industries to developing countries, effectively exporting their emissions. The climate crisis is a collective problem that demands collective action. But it's crucial to acknowledge that not all contributions are equal. While individual choices matter, they pale in comparison to the impact of large corporations. A handful of multinational companies, primarily in the fossil fuel industry, are responsible for a staggering proportion of global greenhouse gas emissions. These corporate giants have known about the dangers of climate change for decades, but have prioritized profit over the planet. While individuals are constantly bombarded with messages about reducing their carbon footprints, these corporate giants continue to operate with impunity, extracting and burning fossil fuels at an alarming rate. Blaming individuals for the climate crisis is not only unfair but also a dangerous distraction. It shifts the focus away from the real culprits, the corporations and industries that are driving this crisis. Section 5. Empty Promises, the Failure of Global Action. Addressing the climate crisis requires global cooperation. It is a challenge that transcends borders, affecting every nation, every community, and every individual on this planet. The need for a united front has never been more urgent. Yet, despite decades of international negotiations and agreements, progress has been woefully inadequate. The promises made in grand halls and conference rooms often fail to translate into meaningful action on the ground. The urgency of the crisis is met with a frustratingly slow response. The gap between rhetoric and action remains vast. Leaders speak of ambitious targets and bold initiatives, but the reality is that these words often lack the necessary follow-through. Time is ticking, and the window for effective action is closing rapidly. The Paris Agreement, hailed as a landmark achievement, relies on voluntary commitments from individual countries. It was a moment of hope, a signal that the world was ready to take collective action. However, the voluntary nature of these commitments means that there is no guarantee of their fulfillment. However, these pledges are often insufficient and lack enforcement mechanisms. Without binding commitments, countries can easily fall short of their targets without facing any real consequences. This lack of accountability undermines the entire framework of international climate agreements. The agreement itself is non-binding, allowing nations to backtrack on their promises without facing consequences. This flexibility, while politically convenient, is a significant weakness in the fight against climate change. Moreover, the issue of climate justice remains a major stumbling block. The impacts of climate change are not felt equally around the world. Those who have contributed the least to the problem are often the ones who suffer the most. Developing countries, often hit hardest by the impacts of climate change, argue that they should not bear the same burden as developed nations, which are historically responsible for the crisis. This disparity creates tension and hinders the progress of global agreements. The lack of financial and technological support from richer countries further exacerbates this divide. Without adequate resources, developing nations struggle to implement necessary measures to combat climate change and adapt to its effects. Without concrete action and a commitment to equity, international agreements will continue to ring hollow. The world needs more than just words. It needs decisive, inclusive, and sustained action to address the climate crisis effectively. Section 6. Sharing the burden, not equally, a matter of scale. While everyone has a role to play in tackling climate change, the responsibility is not equally distributed. Each individual can contribute by making small yet impactful changes in their daily lives. Simple actions like recycling, reducing waste, and using reusable bags can collectively make a difference. It's essential to recognize the disparity in impact between individuals, governments, and corporations. The scale of influence varies significantly, with larger entities having a more substantial effect on the environment. Governments and corporations have the capacity to implement wide-reaching changes that can alter the course of our environmental future. Individuals can make conscious choices to reduce their environmental footprint, such as adopting sustainable lifestyles, consuming less, and advocating for change. Actions like cycling to work, planting trees, and participating in community cleanups are steps in the right direction. These efforts, though small on their own, can inspire broader societal shifts. However, their actions alone cannot solve a crisis of this magnitude. The environmental challenges we face are vast and complex, requiring coordinated efforts at all levels of society. The visible impacts of climate change, such as barren landscapes, melting glaciers, and extreme weather events, underscore the urgency of collective action. Governments have the power to enact policies that promote sustainability, invest in renewable energy, regulate polluting industries, and hold corporations accountable. By setting ambitious climate goals and creating frameworks for action, they can drive significant progress. Policies that support renewable energy projects, like wind and solar farms, are crucial. They can create incentives for green initiatives and disincentivize environmentally harmful practices. Government incentives for electric vehicles, solar panel installations, and energy-efficient appliances can encourage widespread adoption of sustainable technologies. These measures can help reduce our reliance on fossil fuels and lower greenhouse gas emissions. Corporations, particularly those in the fossil fuel industry, bear the most significant responsibility. Their operations have historically contributed to a large portion of global emissions. The transition to cleaner energy sources is not just a necessity, but a moral obligation for these companies. They have profited immensely from activities that pollute the planet and must be held accountable for their actions. Public pressure and regulatory measures can compel these corporations to change their practices. Protests and advocacy play a vital role in pushing for corporate accountability and environmental justice. They have the resources and the moral imperative to transition to cleaner technologies and invest in a sustainable future. By investing in renewable energy, sustainable practices, and innovative technologies, corporations can lead the way towards a greener, more sustainable world. Their commitment to change can set a powerful example for others to follow. Section 7. A toolkit for change from renewables to regulations. The good news is that we already have many of the solutions needed to address the climate crisis. What we lack is the political will and the urgency to implement them on a large scale. Transitioning to renewable energy sources like solar, wind, and geothermal is paramount. These technologies are becoming increasingly affordable and efficient, offering a viable alternative to fossil fuels. Implementing carbon pricing mechanisms, such as carbon taxes or cap-and-trade systems, can make polluting industries pay for their emissions, incentivizing them to reduce their environmental impact. Investing in sustainable infrastructure such as public transportation, energy-efficient buildings, and green spaces can create jobs, improve public health, and reduce our reliance on fossil fuels. Promoting sustainable agriculture and reducing deforestation can help sequester carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and protect biodiversity. Section 8. Time for action. Our future in our hands. The climate crisis is one of the most pressing challenges humanity has ever faced, but it is not insurmountable. We have the knowledge, the tools, and the resources to avert the worst consequences of climate change. What we need now is courage, determination, and collective action. We need leaders who are willing to listen to the science, prioritize the planet over profit, and enact bold policies. We need corporations to take responsibility for their actions, transition to sustainable practices, and become part of the solution. And we need individuals to raise their voices, demand change, and hold those in power accountable. The time for complacency is over. The time for action is now. Our future, and the future of generations to come, depends on the choices we make today. Let us choose wisely.